It's called an Iron Maiden! Run to the hills. Run for your lives. Run to the...
Alright, we're ready to go. I got the Iron Maiden shirt. I got the Trooper beer. I couldn't get the Trooper outfit, but I'm doing a retrospective, not auditioning for the Village People. Season 3, Iron Maiden, let's get into it. The early stages of Iron Maiden were, in a word, interesting. Formed by quite possibly the most influential metal bassist next to Cliff Burton, the mighty Steve Harris, members would be fired for either having too little stage presence or way too much of it. But soon the lineup of Harris, other longtime member Dave Murray, Dennis Stratton, the late great Clive Burr, and one of the most underrated singers on planet Earth, Paul Di'Anno, would soon come together.
I went around his house, and we sat around his house and he's playing me some of the stuff. Like from which was going to be on the first album, and something clicked on that. This is good. This is good. It's not really my kind of music, but it was fast and
And soon to follow would be the debut album, a badass blend of 70s prog rock and punk music, despite Steve Harris's hatred for the latter.
But they want us to get us to cut our hair and all that sort of thing, and we just said, well, no way, because it's not what we want to do, and they want us to play more commercial music.
And like any good debut album, it's packed with youthful intensity and punchy songwriting. All the quintessential elements of Maiden are present and accounted for. Melodic riffs and solos? Check. Galloping bass? Check. Driving drums? Checkerino, neighbor. And powerful vocals? Yes. Now, I can already hear some of you belly aching. Oh, Paul is not as good a singer as Bruce. Look, I happen to agree with you on that front, but to discredit him outright is a disservice to Paul Di'Anno. His booming bellow and punk rock shrieks are superb, and I would pay a hefty fee to see any of you Paul Di'Anno haters try and sing his songs.
Living here is not what it seems.
The self-titled debut album, raw production or no, is a great album. Iconic anthems like Running Free, Iron Maiden, Phantom of the Opera, but for me, my favorite track is gonna have to be Prowler.
Walking through the city, looking at something, I just got to find my way.
The album was a smash success, debuting at number 4 on the British charts and netting the band an opening slot for Kiss, who they blew off the stage every night, which was not hard to do as this was the Unmasked tour, but that's a story for another day. Iron Maiden had put themselves in the forefront of the new wave of British heavy metal, and they were just getting started.
To stay close to their fans, and drummer Clive Burr came outside for a while to talk to the crowd.
What do you like about Iron Maiden?
I like them because they put out heavy metal, no garbage disco, no new wave, nothing! Nothing but heavy metal!
This man talks some sense.
With Dennis Stratton getting the boot after the Kiss tour, the band picked up guitar extraordinaire Adrian Smith, who Harris wanted from the outset but was busy with other projects. With him, the band blew the roof off of Britain with Killers. Everything the debut did is doubled here. Dave and Adrian's guitars are connected at the hip, and severing the two would result in both dying. Steve's songwriting and bass work are boosted, with absolutely no influence from other bands. But what really sells me on this album is Paul Di'Anno's voice. Despite being loaded on enough drug and drink to make Keith Richards nervous,
Motorhead, yeah, they're all right actually, but I can never go and see Lemmy without him getting me absolutely blind drunk, because we go out drinking now and again. Oh Christ, and he's unbelievable, that man. There's no way I could ever compete with him.
he still delivers what I consider a career performance. Killers kills. Sorry, it had to be done. Now, a lot of people throw their praises at songs like, Wrathchild and the title track, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, people. This album gets better the deeper you go. Songs like Another Life, Purgatory, and my personal favorite track, the Edgar Allan Poe-inspired Murders in the Rue Morgue.
Murders in the
But it wasn't all peachy keen, with Di'Anno's destructive streak resulting in a multitude of cancelled shows. It was all she wrote, and he was out of the band.
And it was a little difficult to sort of get my act together. I was also getting a little bit disillusioned with what was going on with me and, you know, some of the stuff in the band. And I thought the best option was for me to opt out instead of getting in the band's way. And the band was thinking that at the same time. So
Look, I adore Di'Anno, and he's 100% responsible for all the success the band has accrued up until this point. But much like how AC/DC's Back in Black was going to be a smash success no matter who sang on it, it's now time to talk about Iron Maiden's equivalent.
On that Sunday, we were working on the track Number of the Beast. It was a rainy night. I hit this van. I look in the back of the van. It's got windows, and it's got about half a dozen nuns in the back. Well, I think that's a bit unusual. You know, Sunday, whatever. And this guy starts praying to me. Anyway, I think the next day or a couple of days later, I took my Range Rover in to be repaired. So when I went to get the car, they gave me the bill, and it was £666.
With Paul Di'Anno taking his drug problems and punk affectations out the door with him, who would step up to be the new Iron Maiden frontman? Screw it, we don't need any build-up or questioning. We all know that would be the speaker-shattering Bruce motherfucking Dickinson.
Right when Rod Smallwood came to you and said, hey, would you be interested in this position with Iron Maiden, you immediately knew the job's mine.
I made the assumption that
Sure.
you're going to be fronting a major heavy metal band which is already #1 and going around doing stadiums and things like that. Well, it was actually not stadiums then, but yes, I take your point.
Getting there, yeah.
Getting there, yeah.
Written with their new singer's voice in mind, the punk side of Maiden would fall to the wayside, but it would be replaced with more melody and metal on the iconic Number of the Beast. Now, like I said in my Judas Priest retrospective, a lot of bands' most popular albums are way overhyped. But unlike British Steel, the Number of the Beast lives up to that hype. If you're gonna deny metal classics like Number of the Beast itself and Run to the Hills, your license to practice metal is gonna get revoked. However, I will submit that what's considered the filler material on this album doesn't live up to the filler material on the album before it, and certainly not after it, but we'll get to that. But if you take songs like the amazing 22 Acacia Avenue and Children of the Damned on their own terms, they'll annihilate your ass. In fact, one of my favorite songs, if not my personal favorite song off this album, is considered a filler track, the awesome Invaders.
Rumors have been cited and the evidence of war has begun. Many Nordic fighting when their swords.
Honestly, the only song I can't stand on this album is The Prisoner. God, that chorus makes me want to disembowel myself with this bottle opener. But, of course, the song that everyone and their mother talks about is Hallowed Be Thy Name, considered by many as the best Iron Maiden song ever written.
#1, Hallowed Be Thy Name. If you don't love this song, you don't love metal.
That totally wasn't plagiarized, and Steve Harris had no idea who Beckett were beforehand.
When you're dead in the heat of the morning, when you're dead.
Regardless, it's still a fantastic song. While I personally wouldn't recommend Number of the Beast as a starting point, it's still a good album. Good, but not great. For great, look no further than Peace of Mind. With a new singer and a #1 album at their backs, the band took all the good and bad publicity from said #1 album and went to work on a workhorse, but not before losing drummer Clive Burr.
The last time I did an Iron Maiden interview, it was almost exactly a year ago. I talked to then drummer Clive Burr.
Yeah.
Why is he not in the band anymore?
Well, they had a lot of personal problems back home,
Mm-hmm.
sort of personal and emotional things. think.
I see, yeah.
It really got to affecting his playing.
Didn't feel like I wanted to leave. I just got asked to leave one day, and that was it.
And the one to take his place would be former Trust drummer Nico McBrain. Now, while I personally prefer Burr's drumming more, Nico McBrain fits like a glove on this album, delivering devastation on every track. When I say Peace of Mind is a great album, it doesn't stop at the Trooper, although it does help. Taking all the melody-driven aspects of The Number of the Beast and shifting them into third gear. This album boasts quite possibly the most underrated material the band ever wrote. I mean, where to start? I mean, you got songs like Quest for Fire, Revelations, Die With Your Boots On, Sun and Steel. But my blue ribbon is going to have to go to quite possibly my favorite Iron Maiden track, full stop, Flight of Icarus. A beautiful, melodic, and soaring track that was inspired by the Greek myth. Maiden tend to take pride in their literary lyrics.
We wrote this song called Flight of Icarus. It's a fable. It's about this bloke named Icarus, right? And one day he goes, hello, I think I'm gonna go fly about. So he builds some wings out of wax and feathers, right? And he goes flying about like a cunt through the air, right? And he goes up to this rumored ball of fire called the sun that hides obscured by the clouds over the UK, right? So he goes up to the rumored ball of fire and the wings melt because they're made out of wax, right? So he goes plummeting down to the earth and he fucking dies, right?
Peace of Mind legitimized Bruce's place in the band, but now it was time to make it too legit to quit. At least for now.
Virtually everybody I know who's seen one of our shows expecting some sort of social curse or dreaded, some sort of phenomenon that's going to corrupt the morals of their town, what they see is 7,000 or 10,000 young kids, and people really from 15 to 25, having a great time, enjoying themselves with a show that delivers a lot of value for money.
As a stage show, it was spectacular. As noise, it was awe-inspiring. As music, it was average.
Powerslave. What is there to say about Powerslave? Well, to put it simply, from the opening aircraft anthem, Aces High, to the closing 13-minute symphony, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, this album kills it with one track, resurrects you for the next, and repeats the process 8 times over. This album is all killer, no filler, but you never get your fill. I will admit that I listened to this album way more times than the other when doing the listening part of this retrospective. But could you blame me? With songs like 2 Minutes to Midnight, The Duelist, and Flash of the Blade, how could I not? I also took extra time to gawk at live footage from this tour. I don't like this album. I love this album. If there ever was a way to weird science it into a human form, I would do so many depraved, dark side of Pornhub things to it that I would drop dead of exhaustion. Whew. Whew. Perhaps I went a little too far. But you know what? It's an album worth going that far for. Powerslave is a powerful album. I hoist it by the crotch and the throat and declare it best in show. Following it up with an iconic gig at the first Rock in Rio and the Live After Death album, the 13-month-long tour would take its toll on Maiden.
Since their first album was released in 1980, Iron Maiden have conquered the world, earning for themselves over 76 different gold and platinum albums and selling more than 10 million records in over 20 different countries. September 1986 sees the release of the band's first studio album in 2 years. Entitled Somewhere in Time, I'd like to be the first, though I dare say not the last, to say I think it's the band's best album in years.
What? What the fuck?
With just 4 months to recover from a tour that lasted longer than a year, Steve, Adrian, and Dave went to work on songwriting, this time incorporating more synthesizers into the affair. Oh crap, do we have another Into the Unknown on our hands? Well, actually, no. Now, I don't hate synths of any variety. When used properly, they can add, variety, atmosphere, and layers to the songs that they're incorporated in. And on Somewhere in Time, they do. Hey, it could have been worse. Bruce Dickinson wanted more acoustic songs to be on this album, but that idea was nixed, thankfully, for a more cyberpunk affair. Not the game, this is actually good. But good is all I'd call Somewhere in Time. I wouldn't exactly call it great. With more filler than a Boston cream donut, the highlights are still quintessential Maiden. And like I said earlier, the new technology doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. It adds the aforementioned atmosphere and layers to the proceedings. But I just can't say I dig this album all that much, which is weird because it was actually the first Iron Maiden album I listened to. But then I heard Powerslave and it was on from there. But I already creamed my jocks over that album once, I'm not doing it twice. Somewhere in Time may be lower on my list, but I recommend you give it a spin. You may love it.
You've just released your 7th album, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son.
Correct. Yes,
Ta-da.
it is. Who am I looking at? You or him?
Well, I want you to look at
him.
Seventh son of a seventh son. Seventh son of a seventh son. Seventh son of a seventh son. Seventh son of a seventh son.
The synthcraft of Somewhere in Time was taken to its logical extreme on Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. And the word extreme doesn't just apply to the soundscape. This album also contains some of the most progressive pieces of Maiden's 80s output. Now, Maiden have had progressive music baked into their core since the beginning, but they always balanced it out with a punk edge that kept the songs from flying off the handle. Iron Maiden are no Rush, as if you'd want to be, but what you get here is Iron Maiden's 2112, and if that gets you hard, then good for you, I'm glad you're happy. But I am not happy.
I'm so depressed I don't know what I'm doing. I have not got a clue.
But all the while, I wouldn't call this album bad. It's more of a half and half. My favorite material is the shorter, punchier stuff with a little bit of progressiveness sprinkled in just to keep things interesting. Songs like Can I Play With Madness, The Evil That Men Do, The Clairvoyant, and my personal favorite track, Moonchild. But when it comes to the more progressive pieces, I just pass on them. I've stated many times on this show that I am not a big fan of progressive music, so it shouldn't come as a shock that I don't simp Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Hell, even the band thought they went too far afield with this one, so a return to roots was in the cards.
We're lucky because in the sense at the moment we're top of the pile and we've been doing it for 10 years and we've got a big fan base, and yes, they do help to put the records up there. Yeah. And now there's a big kerfuffle because we made #1. But we've had top 10 singles for the last 10 years, and it's only now we've made #1 that it's actually focused all the attention on it. And people are starting to throw up their hands in horror and go, oh my gosh, and they didn't get any airplay. We haven't had any airplay for 10 years, basically.
With a hankering to get back to basics, Adrian Smith would take his leave from the band as he wanted to progress with progressive music. Shacking up with Yannick Gers, who worked with Bruce Dickinson on his Tattooed Millionaire album, the band convened in Steve Harris's private barn studio to work on their stripped-down album. No Prayer for the Dying has been raked over the coals and deemed a bad album by even some of the band members themselves, but I don't get that. From the opening Tail Gunner, you're beat over the head with killer track after killer track. I just don't understand why people think this album is a shit pile.
Hooks in you, hooks in me, hooks in the scene of all that wow I'm feeling, no big deal.
Okay, yeah, that song does blow some hot ass, and Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter should have never left the Dream Child soundtrack, let alone the demo stage. But are we really gonna let a couple clunkers take away from killer material like Holy Smoke, Run Silent, Run Deep, and my favorite track, Mother Russia?
Mother Russia, how are you sleeping? Middle winter, cold winds blow from the trees, the snowflakes.
Well, 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 and here I thought you didn't like Progressive Maiden. Bitch, this is more peace of mind than Seventh Son, so you can kiss my ass, but you're gonna have to wait in line. No Prayer for the Dying is dunked on by a majority of Maiden fans, but baby, I ain't one of them.
Fear of the dark, fear of the dark. I have a phobia that something's always near. Hi.
Now I'm here, can you see me? Kissing out at me when the room goes cold.
Well, they made an attempt at a Return to Roots record, and it went over like the Hindenburg, so a little bit more experimentation went into the next album. Fear of the Dark, much like its older brother No Prayer for the Dying, is an album that gets routinely shit on by the Maiden faithful, and once again I find myself listening to songs like Be Quick or Be Dead, Judas Be My Guide, The Apparition, Chains of Misery, and I honestly wonder aloud, why so salty, Maiden fans? But don't get me wrong, much like No Prayer for the Dying, there are a couple clunkers, and that ballad Wasting Love is a waste of wax. But for every mad track, a Titanic one is sure to follow, like my personal favorite track, Fear is the Key, singing about the AIDS epidemic, even dropping a line about Freddie Mercury, who, in a No Child Left Behind approach, died tragically from the disease.
Kids have lost their freedom, and nobody cares till somebody famous dies.
Freddie was like the world's biggest gossip. He'd talk to a bunch of people, then he'd go to another bunch of people and say, you know what he said over there just a minute ago? And then he'd be whispering into people's ears and said, and Freddie had created this entire gossip community within the space of about half an hour, and then he just vanished.
Freddie lost his life, and Bruce Dickinson lost a friend. But that wasn't the only thing affecting him at this point. With year-long tours aplenty and several creative differences approaching a boil, in 1993, he announced his exit from Iron Maiden.
There's a lot of things in Maiden that you can't do because you're in Iron Maiden, and because we have a core audience that's pretty conservative about its musical tastes. You don't want to upset people for the sake of it, so I figured that it would be better for me to leave the band.
However, he did agree to do one final tour, which went as well as you think it did, and then he was out. If Iron Maiden had called it a career here, Fear of the Dark would have been a great album, I think, to call it on. But we all know that didn't happen.
The X Factor. Well, the X Factor could stand for one of two things. It could be number 10, or it could be X.
It can mean the unknown, it can mean the X generation, it can mean the X Factor, the feeling, the chemistry within the band.
Sometimes we play through and it'll be, oh, yes, 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 yes.
Poring over hundreds of tapes in an attempt to find a replacement for their siren singer, it wasn't until they heard the bellow of one Blaze Bayley from Wolfsbane that they thought they had something.
And then when Bruce left and they were looking for a replacement, they were auditioning different people, and Steve phoned me up and he said, would you like to have an audition for the band? He said, we already know your stuff and we've seen you live, so we're doing the auditions. Would you like to have a go at it? And I said, yeah, because, I liked, even from my very early days when I was cleaning the hotel, I was listening to Iron Maiden and I always loved the band.
And after his audition and audition, we get to the X Factor. Now hear me well, because I don't want to give off the wrong impression. I think that Blaze Bayley is a great singer. Listen to him in Wolfsbane. Listen to his solo stuff after he left Maiden. It all kills. But the big problem here is, surprise, surprise, he's not Bruce Dickinson. And that's not Blaze's fault. It's really Steve Harris's fault for not tuning down the instruments to accommodate for his different vocal style. If Maiden had tuned down their instruments a half or hell, maybe even a whole step, Blaze could have sounded like he does on said albums. But instead, he sounds like this. Oh, God. The strained howl Blaze has to use is bad enough, but it's not the only reason I think the X Factor is a bad album. The majority of the tracks here are just long and plodding and poopy, with a quiet intro and a snail-like pace to a climax that ends quicker than... Nope, that's disgusting, can't say that. I mean, there are some cool tracks here. I think Fortunes of War is pretty nice, and I really do like Lord of the Flies.
Saints and sinners, something within us. We are Lord of the Flies.
But as for the rest of the material on the X Factor, make haste to something better.
Don't you think I'm a savior? Don't you think I could save you? Don't you think I could save your life?
Okay, this is the complete opposite of what I meant by better. Virtual 11 is a worse album than the X Factor by a country fucking mile. More filler than 10 animes that don't deserve to be as popular as they are. I'm only teasing, weebs, you're cool. More strainy Blazy, more forgettable performances, and what? Hold on. What did I just hear? Did Iron Maiden just rip off Nirvana? Alright, pack it in, we're done here. This album sucks. Oh, Liam, you didn't give it its fair shake. Yeah, I did. Next.
And at the moment, it seems like we're really, really cool. It's really cool to like Maiden, you know. Spice Girls are wearing Iron Maiden t-shirts, you know, and stuff like that. You know, rap artists are like, yeah, I've got my Iron Maiden t-shirt. I was front row in 1986. It actually is a source of great relief to me that it sounds like an Iron Maiden record.
With 2 back-to-back clunkers and cancelled shows due to Blaze having vocal issues, cue the clip. It wasn't long until they were hitting up the little black book looking for a new singer. But when their manager, Rod Smallwood... What? Asked them to consider bringing Bruce back into the band, they actually did. Even Adrian Smith came along for the ride, making Maiden a 6-piece, 3-guitar band. Or a 2-guitar band with Yannick Gers throwing his guitar around the stage for a couple hours, but that's neither here nor there. And what would follow? The reunion tour would be the reunion album, Brave New World. Once the Wicker Man kicks in, you know the Blaze Bayley era is well in the rearview mirror, despite taking a few tracks from that era along with them. Now, Maiden fans far and wide have busted their nuts over this album, myself included. Hell, a review of the album is this. Whoa. Yeah, and I thought I was descriptive. But you know what? He's right. When you listen to songs like The Wicker Man, the title track, The Mercenary, and Ghost of the Navigator, how can you say he's wrong?
I see the ghosts of navigators, but they are lost. As they sail into the sunset, they'll count the...
Brave New World showed that while the calendar may read 2000, it's still classic Maiden all the same. But now that the boys are back together, what if they got up their sleeves?
I'm gonna organize some changes in my life. I'm gonna exorcise the demons of my
past. Sorry. I'm just trying to compose myself. That fucking album cover got to me. Oh God. Oh. And here I thought the Angel and the Gambler video was bad. And speaking of bad, Dance of Death sadly is. Look, I'm not gonna say it's front to back bad. The first 2 tracks are killer, and Gates of Tomorrow is a really good track.
Trapped in the way, but I cut the threads. Show you the gates of tomorrow.
But when the best track track off this album rips off the opening riff of a song on one of my least favorite Maiden albums, Iron Maiden should have known to leave this thing in the oven a little while longer to get that golden crust. That goes double for their fucking album cover. Oh, fuck. Sorry, Maiden, I'm gonna have to turn down this Dance of Death.
Mr. Shirley?
Yes.
That singers produce a strange amino acid when the lungs are stressed, which makes them prone to being overweight. Scientific fact.
Does that have anything to do with that massive ego?
Oh, yeah.
After tripping up with Dance of Death, could Iron Maiden pick themselves back up? No. Look, A Matter of Life and Death is really not the album for me. Now, I feel like a broken record saying that I prefer shorter, punchier material. I could even make a drinking game out of the fact that I say I can make a drinking game out of that. It's not just that the songs are long, it's that they're just so goddamn slow. Old people fuck faster than these songs progress. Really, Maiden? You couldn't even pick up the tempo for at least one track, and you even decided to play this whole album for the tour? Look, playing whole albums back to back is not a new thing. But you do that with your classics, not your new material, and especially not when it's this material. It is a matter of life and death. Put this fucker down. Come on, Maiden. Have you got anything else?
Have you seen what they said on the news today? Have you heard what they said about us all? Do you know?
The Final Frontier is the final straw. It's a good thing the fans liked it because I think it sucks. I mean, it has two tolerable tracks in The Alchemist and El Dorado.
Gotta tell you a story on a cold winter's night.
But that's just what they are. Tolerable. The rest of the material, however, is progressive piss squared. Now I know what some of you are thinking, and I know it's a shame that sometimes opinions coincide, but you know what? I can't help it. This album sucks. It blows like the wild wind. Why the fuck is that song 11 minutes long? Alright, Maiden, I ask you once again, do you have literally anything else? Well, I'll take it. While it still stinks of the last 3 albums, I'm a little bit more forgiving to the Book of Souls. Probably because it almost didn't happen, as Bruce Dickinson got diagnosed with cancer. The kicker, out of all places he could have got it, he got it on the tongue.
Dr. Google and Professor Wikipedia told me that there's a strong possibility that this might be a cancerous tumour.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if it is, do I really want to know now? Or would I prefer to wait 6 weeks until I've done all the vocals and finished the record? I'd go home at weekends and I'd say, sit there and you're having a beer and sort of go, oh, this lump. People go, oh yeah, you do, yeah, it's a bit of a lump, isn't it? Yeah.
He recorded all of his vocal tracks before the diagnosis, and for the most part, he sounds really good. But then again, this is Bruce Dickinson, and he's as good at singing as he is flying airplanes, fencing, brewing beer. Holy shit, calm down with the extracurricular activities there, Brucey. Who are you trying to impress? You're an Iron Goddamn Maiden. Now, if I'm as predictable as a sunrise, you're probably thinking, oh, here comes the part where he talks about how he likes the shorter songs and not the longer ones. But actually, when it comes to the Book of Souls, I like a lot of the longer songs. I mean, Speed of Light is cool, and Tears of a Clown is a great tribute to Robin Williams, but I really like songs like Empire of the Clouds, the longest Iron Maiden song, by the way, The Red and the Black, and my personal favorite track is If Eternity Should Fail. But that's mainly because those songs share more in common with Rime of the Ancient Mariner than A Matter of Life and... It's a step in the right direction, and if British Lion helps Steve write some shorter songs like he says, I'd be more than happy to see what these guys come up with. But then again, it is Iron Maiden, a heavy metal legacy. Well, that does it for the first episode of Season 3 of the Retrospective. I thank you all once again for sitting with me, and until next time, up the irons with Iron Maiden, I'm Liam Winfield. Keep on rockin'.